Hey guys, today we're going to talk about simplifying radicals. So first of all, it's what the heck is a radical? Whenever you see that little square root sign, and those can be other roots, that is called the radical. Now sometimes there's a little number inside of that check mark of the radical. That thing is called the index. It tells us what root to take. If there's no index written there, it's assumed to be 2 or to be a square root. There are also cubed roots, which has a 3 there, fourth roots, which have a 4 there, things like that. The number that's underneath the radical inside of there is called the radicand, which is just a cool word, radicand. I like that word. All right, so here's what we're going to do to simplify non-perfect square roots. We find the biggest perfect square that evenly divides the radicand, and then we break that up into 2 separate square roots, take the square root of one of them and leave the other one underneath the square root. I'll show you how this works here in a little bit. So what's best is to start with what are our perfect squares. So remember, when we square a number, that means we're going to multiply it by itself. So 1 times 1 is 1. 2 times 2 is 4. 3 times 3 is 9, so on and so forth. 4 times 4 is 16. 5 times 5 is 25. 6 times 6 is 36. 7 times 7 is 49. 8 times 8 is 64. 9 times 9 is 81. 10 times 10 is 100. 11 times 11 is 121. 12 times 12 is 144. 13 times 13 is 169. 14 times 14 is 196. And 15 times 15 is 225. Okay, so we want to find the biggest perfect square that goes into 75. So what I do is I start with the value that is just less than 75. Now I take 75 divided by 64. Does that go in evenly? No, it doesn't. So then we'll take 75 divided by 49. Does that come out evenly? No. Just 75 divided by 36. Does that come out evenly? No. But 75 divided by 25, that does come out evenly. So I can rewrite the square root of 75 as the square root of 25 times. So we know 25 was the biggest perfect square that goes into 75. And then what number do I have to multiply by 25 to get to 75? 3. So now I'm going to break those square roots, or that square root, into 2 separate square roots. So I have the square root of 25 times the square root of 3. Now we know what the square root of 25 is. That's 5. But we don't know what the square root of 3 is. It's some gross number, right? So we're just going to stick the square root of 3 on the end. So square root of 75 is equal to 5 square root 3. Okay, let's look at the next one. We're trying to find the biggest number that goes into 40. Okay, so we're going to start with the number that is less than 40, 36. 40 divided by 36 doesn't come out evenly. 40 divided by 25 doesn't come out evenly. 40 divided by 16 doesn't come out evenly. 40 divided by 9 doesn't come out evenly. 40 divided by 4, though, absolutely does. So I know 4 is the biggest perfect square that goes into 40. What do I have to multiply by 4 to get to 40? 10. Okay, so then we'll split that up into 2 separate square roots, the square root of 4 and the square root of 10. We know the square root of 4 is 2, and we don't know the square root of 10, so we'll just leave him like that. Okay, on this next one, we're looking at 128. So let's see, we'll take 128 divided by 121. That doesn't come out evenly. 128 divided by 100, that doesn't come out evenly. 128 divided by 81, that doesn't come out evenly. 128 divided by 64, though, does. So when we take 128 divided by 64, so we're going to put 64 here. it comes out evenly. And you might notice that when you take 128 divided by 64, it leaves you with 2, right? So that means that 64 times 2 is what gave me that 128. So now I'll split that up into two separate square roots, the square root of 64 and the square root of 2. The square root of 64 is 8, but we don't know what the square root of 2 is, so we'll just leave it there with it. This next one is asking for the square root of 100. Well, that is a perfect square, right? We know what the square root of 100 is. The square root of 100 from up above is 10. Go ahead and try simplifying the square root of 72 on your own. All right, so the biggest perfect square that goes into 72 is 36. So you broke that up into the square root of 36 times the square root of 2. The square root of 36 is 6. Keep that square root of 2 on the end. Okay, so now we're throwing a little number out in front. That's not going to change anything though. So I'm just going to keep 4 times. And then I need to put I need to find the biggest perfect square that goes into 200. So when I'm looking through all of these numbers, we absolutely can take 200 divided by 196, 200 divided by 169, 200 divided by 144. But it's also really obvious that 100 is going to go into 200, right? So we know that's 100 times. And then what times 100 gives me 200? 2. So now we'll break that up. We have 4 times, and then we have the square root of 100 times the square root of 2. So now we have 4 times. The square root of 100 is 10. And we still have that times the square root of 2. 4 times 10 is 40, and then we still have that square root 2 on the end of it. Okay. Let's try this guy. So what's the biggest perfect square that goes into 27? So let's check every number less than 27. 27 divided by 5 doesn't come out evenly. 27 divided by 16 doesn't come out evenly. 27 divided by 9 comes out to be 3 though, so I know I can use that one. So we got -2, square root. We decided the biggest perfect square that goes into 27 is 9 times. And then what times 9 gives me 27? We'll end up with 3 there. So now I have -2 times, and then we're going to break these up into their own square roots. The square root of 9 times the square root of 3. Now we know what the square root of 9 is. The square root of 9 is 3. Oh, went away for a second. That was scary. Times the square root of 3. And then we take -2 times 3 and get -6. And then square root 3 on the end of that. Go ahead and try the next one real quick. So hopefully you noticed that 64 is a perfect square. So the square root of 64 is 8. And that negative just kind of drops on down with it. So the opposite of the square root of 64 is going to be -8. Okay, now let's look at the square root of 30. Go ahead and simplify that one on your own, square root of 30. Okay, so maybe you ran into some issues with the square root of 30, right? So 25 doesn't go into 30, 16 doesn't go into 30, 9 doesn't go into 30, and neither does 4. Only 1 goes into 30, right? So actually, that can't be simplified at all. So if I wanted to simplify the square root of 30, he's just the square root of 30. There's nothing else we can do there. And then let's talk about the square root of -36. So remember, when we take the square root of like 49 and we get 7, that's because we know 7 times 7 equals 49. Now also -7 times -7 is equal to 49, right? There is no way for me to multiply two numbers together, the same number together, and get a negative number. There's no way that I can take a 6 times a 6 and end up with a negative 36. That's not going to happen. Even if both of them were negative, it would come out to be positive. If I take the square root of a negative number, it is not real. So my answer here is it is not real. Awesome. All right, see you guys a little bit later.